Hey, we're back, everyone. And as you can see, I have Hannah Carlan with me today. Hannah, thank you so much for coming out and spending some time with us for this interview. Can I ask real quick, what part of the world are you in right now?
I currently live in Maine.
Oh, in Maine. Okay.
Yeah, we lived in Seattle for several years, and then we left at the beginning of COVID, and we moved here, and we're about to pack up and head south. So,
Yeah, the Maine winter wasn't doing it for you?
I repel good weather, so it hasn't barely snowed here at all.
Oh, wow.
As soon as I leave, it'll be like, a few weeks from now, we'll leave, and it'll just like snow for a month straight.
Oh, really?
I just repel good weather.
Oh, wow.
It's just a curse.
That I did not expect to hear.
Okay.
Well, thanks for doing that. We just got done with frozen rain down here in Virginia, so
Where in Virginia?
we're in Northern Virginia, just outside of DC. So
Like Alexandria?
well, just outside of DC. We're just gonna leave it at that.
Okay. That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Very familiar with that area.
So,
So,
are you? Well, anytime you're in
like
DC, you're welcome to stop by and hang out with us in person. Love to have you.
Oh, thank you. It's a great area. We've traveled there. I used to go to conferences in DC all the time. So
Okay, excellent.
I love it.
Excellent. And as you and I and Chet from Tech, our Tech Goblin Chat, he's awesome. We're talking, we know that you would come down here, but it's all so we can actually meet your husband.
Oh, it's totally fine. I know you guys just want to meet me to like really meet Corey. It's totally fine. I get it. It's totally fair.
Yeah. So you're a writer and a tabletop game player, as well as a TTRPG writer. Which came first, the writer or the gamer?
The gaming part. I got started playing tabletop in the early 90s because I couldn't figure out math well.
Okay.
And my uncle, who's a big D&D nerd, was like, this might help you. Here's Stack Zero. And
oh, really?
That's how I kind of learned math. So
okay. That's
that sort of happened. And then there was like kind of a drop off because I liked GURPS and nobody else liked GURPS in Georgia in the 90s. So then when I met Corey, we kind of picked up D&D again and it became like a big thing. So
oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you switched off from that. So your first game was GURPS. That was the thing.
AD&D.
AD&D. It was AD&D. Okay, I did hear that correct, and then I misunderstood when you said GURPS.
GURPS just throws everybody off. Nobody expects anyone to own up to liking GURPS. It's okay.
There's nothing wrong with GURPS. I think GURPS is a great system. It's a system that can, it's designed to be a system for anything.
I know. That's what's so fantastic about it, and everybody hates on it.
Yeah. Is that your favorite one to play?
GURPS? No, I will say that probably for the last 6 months or so, Blades in the Dark is pretty much the only thing that I love.
Really?
So much. Yeah.
Really? Would you like to play some Blades in the Dark?
Yeah. So I am in a Blades in the Dark game, and I can remember like on Twitter, people that I know talking about these games that just affect them and stay with them, and these characters that just they feel like they know and they're their friends. And I never really experienced that until this Blades in the Dark game.
Really?
And now I get that. Now I get why people get so emotionally attached to their characters. I'm always like, hey, whatever, if you die in a dungeon, that's cool. Pull out the next character sheet and keep going. But now I get why people are so attached.
Yeah.
And it took Blades in the Dark. D&D has never, at least up until now, never done that for me. But Blades in the Dark did.
Oh, wow. It's always interesting when you can see that happen.
Yeah.
From your transition there, as you were doing these things, you played in Blades in the Dark. What's your favorite game to run? Or at least your RPG to run. Is it?
It's gonna be 5e.
5e. D&D 5e.
Predominantly because I like theater of the mind in a 5e setting where I don't have to worry about you like having to do the math for you. Like with people that know kind of what they're doing and kind of know how their character sheets work and how the math works. I just like to have simple combat, and I could run 5e all day. So I'm actually running a couple of 5e games in Spawn of the Cyclops Con next month from Goodman Games.
Is that that's a virtual con?
Yeah, next month. So I'm running a couple of 5e games for that. So
you can hype them. Go ahead, hype it.
It's just Spawn of the Cyclops Con is at the end of February next month. And it's like 3 days of playing different games. A lot of it is playtest material. I'm running a never before played Goodman Games like big bag in guy. So that's what I'm doing. So
that sounds like fun.
It's just insanity. That's all. Probability that your character will die is pretty high. So
okay. Yeah. You know, that sounds like Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is
that's how we like to play.
Almond Games. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there an RPG you've not played or run that you would if you had the time?
Alice is Missing.
Alice is Missing, really?
Yeah. I haven't, I've heard of people playing it and having a good experience in a way that seems similar to 10 Candles, which I thought was really
10 Candles is great.
Yeah, so I feel like Alice is Missing, if that's kind of in the same vein, I would be really interested in that. I don't know, it just seems unique.
I'll have to check that one out. I think Grant Ellis was talking about that one not that long ago, and he's on our the Velkin Weave show, and you know he's a lot of fun to talk games with. Oh yeah, he's a lot of fun to talk games with. I get to see him in action every week because of this channel and everything. So, but he was talking about that I think not that long ago. I think it was on Twitter maybe he was talking about it. I'll have to check. So where did you grow up? Like, was it Seattle area or?
No, so I'm from Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Corey, my husband, is from Seattle, and so when we met, I was in grad school, and he wanted to move back to Seattle, and so I was like, sure, that sounds great.
So you were in grad school. What was your grad school?
Yeah. So I was getting a PhD in public budgeting, which is a facet of political science. And
no wonder you went to DC a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Did a lot of traveling with the poli-sci public administration department. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot, but the field is really small. And if you don't graduate from one of the top institutions in the nation, you're probably not going to get a tenure track position. And so you're going into a lot of debt for a career that you can't get at the end of it. So
as they say, PhD stands for piled higher and deeper.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And I gotta say, because a lot of my personal experiences and my background influences the way I, both structure and run my games. And I have a lot of, background in an analysis background, but I've done analysis on everything from politics to economics to military combat capacity and so on. How do you think that your experience, I mean, obviously you're a writer now, and anyone who's gone to grad school does a ton of writing, as you know, right? How do you think that some of those things that you learned in grad school or even your work experience, has that impacted your writing per se?
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I can. Okay. That's totally fine. It was a yes to give me a second to come up with a really good segue. Okay. But grad school. So betrayal is honestly the takeaway that I took from grad school. Sorry, you were probably hoping this was going to be a really great interview, but it's slowly spiraling.
No, it's all right. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Betrayal was like this major takeaway. I had a really horrible committee, and I had terrible advisors that I think were dealing with a lot of their own personal issues that they really projected onto us. And so there were several people in my cohort who were struggling, and it was just a lot of drama coming from the people that should have been looking out for us, and it wasn't a great environment. So I'm studying about coups, and I'm studying about tyranny, and I'm studying about hostile takeovers of economic systems, and I'm watching people implement these same, rhetorical devices or manipulative trademarks through the department. I came away from that thinking, God, anybody in any situation can just be a complete and utter crappy human being.
That's how tyrants are born.
That's just how you build villains.
Yeah.
So
and is that how you build your villains now?
I usually build my villains around a central action I want them to be able to do. So Matt Colville did this great video on creating like action-oriented monsters. And it's this, this whole thing on being able to create new ways for them to interact with the party, with the environment, and new reactions for them that make more sense maybe than what the monster manual kind of wrote.
Not just so cold, generic bad guy, but something that thinks and feels and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like if you've got like a, typical horde, like his example is like a goblin king kind of guy is going to be very based around using his goblin minions. And so all of his actions should kind of be geared to utilize them instead of, just worrying about multi-attack. Anyway, I like to do that with my villains because I think it makes them more holistic people. You have really complex people who do really horrible things. And when you reduce them to just this really terrible thing that they do in this one scenario, you eliminate all of that additional complexity in those layers that make them more unique and more interesting. So I don't know. I just want to.
You make them real that way.
Yeah.
You give them depth. Yeah.
When the dragon turns and like says something to you, I don't want it to just be like, don't steal my awesome stuff in here. I want it to be like, I see into your soul and I'm about to touch you and you're going to panic and then you're going to fire. That's what I want to happen.
Yeah. There's a statement out there that says, I forget, I don't know who the person who said it was. And I if someone out there knows who that is, by all means, tell me, because I would love to hear it. Behind every really great villain, there is a tragedy.
Yeah.
There's a tragic story behind them, and the one suggestion I often give is Darth Vader. He's the iconic villain that everyone knows about for the most part. And you really find out a lot more about his tragic backstory, about his love, his loss, and his sink into what's the word? The seduction of the dark side of the Force, I think is the best way to describe it, and what it cost him as part of that process. And then his only redemption was the guy his redemption was throwing the Emperor down that conduit or whatever it is that smoked him at the end. But there's a whole host of villains that you just know they're bad, but when you can see the ones with the tragedy behind them, they become something you almost feel sorry for them at the same time that you have to do something to stop them.
Yes. When you have that moment of empathy, it touches you in a way, but then you're like, but see, you still destroyed this whole village of people and I can't quite let that go.
Yeah. And so now we got to kill you.
You're like, you cut down a tree. I must make right with the world. So I like that. I think that's interesting. Like if you just think of Lolth and just be like, wow, she's the spider goddess demon lady, then you don't think about her chaos and like how deep that runs into all the horrible things that she does to people in Menzo Baranzan just to mess with them. I love it. It's crazy. I love it.
Well, that's because she is crazy.
That's the best part. Yeah. But if you reduce her, but she's chaos. Like I think the thing with Lolth, her chaos is what is so fascinating. Because to have a truly chaotic, like I really will destroy my own people just for fun. That's a whole new depth to villains and D&D lore.
Let's see here. Some would say you need a Sith to destroy a Sith. A Jedi should just hope to heal the villain's wounds. Aw.
Wow.
That's a very deep statement there from Luke Thomas. So you obviously have this deep research-based and depth of knowledge that has influenced your writing and some of your development of the things you do in both the writing and the TTRPG space. Now, I have to ask, what inspired you to become a writer? I mean, you were already doing it as a PhD candidate. You were writing at least your dissertation, and you were probably already gearing up to write whatever else your research brought you. What made you decide, I think writing is a great thing to do?
So to me, writing was always this inevitability. I will just be a writer at some point in my life. I'll either write, articles to pub, or eventually I'll get into a government job and I'll write big reports. And like, I'm just going to have a field, a position in a field where I just am writing. And when I left my PhD program and we moved to Seattle, I switched careers and I wasn't writing anymore. And all of a sudden, I felt like I had to start writing. And so I started writing fiction. And it took me years to get the courage to finally, I would query it and nothing would happen because it's trash. But it took years for me to try to figure out like what was wrong. Because to me, I was just like, well, I wrote this thing and I don't know exactly what's wrong with it, but I'm just going to keep shooting and maybe eventually something will stick. It took me a long time to go, okay, no, let's get the good feedback to figure out how to make this better. And I don't know, I've just written a lot since then. So
how's your feedback loop work for you? Because I find that I'm one of those guys that I write something and outside of a grammar check, I really don't want the intent of what I'm doing changed. However, what I find is that my intent isn't always conveyed by my words appropriately. How does that work for you?
So I get that.
Yeah.
I get that entirely, because what we think we wrote and what someone else read don't always align.
Yeah.
And so I tend to ask very specific questions, like, and this has come from years of doing this wrong. Years of making tons of mistakes have brought me to the point of asking very specific questions.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to know, how does the plot develop? Does it, is it flowing? Is it whatever? How did this happen? How is this executed? Does this conclusion make sense? Like whatever. I have to ask very specific questions because I'm not interested in your meta feedback on how you would rewrite it and you would do it. Mm-hmm. I want to know what you think about this very specific thing I did. Mm-hmm. Because I'm confident enough that I know enough about how to write something that I didn't screw up something big. Mm-hmm. But having really good people that read your stuff, your beta readers, or your editors or whomever read your content, having people that read it that know how to communicate with you is just vital. Because if your communication strategies are not aligned and they're going to be talking one way and you really just are having a Charlie Brown moment, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that really wants the direct feedback. Like, just tell me what you're really thinking. It's okay. I don't have feelings. But I do have feelings. Don't misunderstand me. Like I make jokes about it, but I have a thick skin, so I can take it. But most of the people I talk to that are trying to give me feedback are trying to talk around it so that they don't hurt my feelings per se. And then I don't understand what's going on and it makes them more frustrated. How's that work for you?
So my husband reads a lot of my stuff. And everything I write, I try to usually vet through him, which one time he was like, you've sent me 15 emails, like within the past 48 hours of different things you've written and revisions you've made that you want me to read down. Like, I can't do this. This is too much. But what we figured out was that he typically is either good news, bad news, or like, I know this is the thing that's worrying you the most. So let's talk about the thing that's worrying you the most and break that down for a second. And then we'll move into whatever else is going on. How you killed off this guy, that works. I like it. But the resolution with all these other ancillary figures, that's messy. We got to deal with that. Or last night, I just got some notes back from a beta reader that I had never worked with before. And I was very nervous about it because I have a desperate need for people to like the stuff that I do. And so I'm waiting for her notes and she finally starts. And I mean, it's like a full 500 word email, just where she brain dumped all of her thoughts about it. And the first thing is, I can tell why this isn't selling, but I think I know how you can make it sell. And I'm like, okay, okay. So I'm wrong and I'm doing something very bad and I haven't figured it out yet, but you know what it is. Yeah. So that's good enough for me. All right, all right. The goal here is to sell the book. So if you know how to make that happen, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I try not to take anything personally about it, unless it's like, I fundamentally disagree with how you wrote this thing and I want to completely change it. And then I'm just out. Like, not even in the conversation anymore.
Yeah. So. Yeah. That's always a challenge when it becomes, hey, you're killing my baby there. Yeah. Yeah. Were there any books, like, because you're writing fiction, I'm assuming, mostly.
Yeah. I mean,
based on the TTRPG angle and stuff like that too. Was there a fictional book that's influenced you that you've read over and over again? Or was there a series that you liked?
So I work with wizards on like an R.A. Salvatore project. As far as like having read those books more than once, and probably the way that you're suggesting, and knowing quite a bit about that.
Anything you enjoyed to read. It's not work related. Something you read and you went, I love this stuff. I want to do this,
Have spent a lot of time reading those books.
Okay.
And so it's something that I feel like I saw through to the end. And there are great stories in that series that I very much love and care about. But outside of that, into like less RPG focused fiction, The Grapes of Wrath was pivotal for me when I read it the first time in like 8th grade, because that was a really good glimpse into suffering and how suffering can effectively be personified by people. And then that summer I had this really insane reading list that's a story of itself. But I read like The Grapes of Wrath, The Bluest Eye, Tree Goes in Brooklyn, all of these kind of heavy hitters. And I think I ended the summer with like Rebecca, the first time I read Rebecca. And so it's all of this tragedy and all of this sadness and suffering. And I just really I felt this whole human experience of suffering far too young at a far too important time in my like emotional and mental development, that like talking about and understanding suffering is very important to what I have to say as a writer, really, in any context.
Yeah. And how have you, I mean, like, evoking suffering, you can describe the physical feelings or the arc, but how do you really convey suffering in a way that somebody else really feels it? If that's been a challenge for me for quite some time. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how you've been able to evoke that.
So what I learned through a lot of trial and failure is that I tend to go to really dark places in my writing. I tend to have like infanticide, like very dark human experiences. And I wrote a short story that got published last fall. And when Corey was reading it the first time, he's like, you can't have this lady kill her baby. Like you just can't do this. And I'm like, but I need that to happen for this other thing to happen in the story. And he's like, I get it. I know why you're doing it. I'm just saying you can't do this. This isn't good. Like you're going too far. And so he's like, bring it back a little bit.
Huh? Yeah.
Yes. Right. So like I'm too heavy handed in how I deliver that suffering. And so what I'm learning to do, I should say still a work in progress, is dialing that back. And I figured out how to, like, she doesn't kill the baby. She abandons the baby and the baby's picked up. The baby doesn't die. And that's like a different experience. It's more palpable to deal with, a lady abandoning a child than like someone killing their child. Whereas I'm like, but I want everyone to hate her. And he's like, you can do that without her killing her baby. Like, don't do that. So I have to dial it back. So when I start writing and I'm really excited about something, I'm like, okay, take a breath back. If I heard this on Oprah, would I think like, no, that lady's just going to hell and like that's it? Or what would I do? Like, how would I feel about it? And then I tend to dial it back. So
that's a genius way of looking at it. Yeah. And then your revision process also, dials it forward or back as you need to.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's like if this is a ticker on TV and it's just this, boiled down set of events, how am I going to feel? Because as a reader, it doesn't matter if you're invested in my characters up until that moment. If you have a visceral reaction to this, you're not going to continue. I think that's why fade to black is so important for all kinds of trauma and assault, is because people can't like actually seeing or reading something that horrifying is just not something people want to experience.
Yeah.
So
have you ever read The Road? It got made into a movie. It's like a post-apocalyptic story about a father with his son.
No.
And they're traveling this road. I made the mistake of trying to read that while I was in Iraq, deployed with the Army, during one of my off moments. And I got partway through it and I put the book down. I've never touched it since. Being in Iraq is already hard enough. You see plenty of suffering there.
Yeah.
And then reading through that, I'm just like, I can't do this right now. Like, this was just too much. And there was a lot in there that's very all about the end of the world is basically happening. People, the few people who are left are doing horrible things. And I just put the book down. I couldn't even finish it. It was dialed forward very hard. If you want to see what forward looks like, check out The Road. It wound up getting made into a movie. I think I forget who's in it. We can look that up real quick. We've got the ability.
Well, I wrote it down on a Post-it note, so I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, Viggo Mortensen's in it. Yeah.
Oh well, shit. Now I'm probably gonna have to watch it because
I'd read the book. I'd read the book. As a writer, you understand what I mean with that. Read the book.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
Do you feel like for that experience that you had, if you had picked that book up at a different time in your life, you would have approached it differently and it wouldn't have affected you so profoundly?
If I had read it before the first time I'd gone to war, probably. But it's entirely possible I'd have read just further in the book and then put it down and not touched it. Because there's some harsh things that happen in that book. And I think in Iraq, because of the things I'd already seen people doing to each other there and the things I knew about and the things that from a personal perspective, and it's an interesting question that you asked me, the interviewer. And I'm okay with that. Please ask questions all you want.
I'm sorry.
No. I would say that, there are things I was already seeing on a day-to-day basis that were already, rough. And the book just certainly wasn't helping things. And all I could think of is, why would anyone send this to people in Iraq? Because it was one of those books that, people sent to you to read for, because people were just sending care packages of books over. Yeah, we used to get boxes of books sent to us. And most of the time, probably about, the sad part about the boxes of books is more than 60 or 70% of them were books that people just threw out. They thought, oh, well, I'm going to throw these in the trash anyway. And they were garbage, absolute garbage books. Like, how many times, how many Harlequin romance novels are soldiers really going to want to read?
No.
But those came out and we'd read them, not because we thought they were great reads, but because we would just read them out loud to each other and start laughing hysterically about some of the scenes in these books, right? Because you're already in a surreal situation and you're reading about, I won't get into the stories of Harlequin romance, but they're hysterical to us. But then you occasionally get that other 30% of the books that are like, oh, this might be something I might actually want to read. Or, I think I reread Cannery Row while I was out there.
Wow.
John Steinbeck.
Yeah.
I think, that's who wrote Cannery Row. I was always a big fan of his works. And I got to read Cannery Row there. And it just seemed right to read that at that moment. But that's, then again, you also have, situations where it's 2 a.m. and somebody who's brought in an electric guitar to the barracks is like playing out by one of the palaces out on the canals, and he's playing, you know, something that was done by Jimi Hendrix, and it's 2 a.m, and you're just like, and then the next thing you see 2 jackals walk by inside the camp, because this area used to be the hunting lodge for Saddam Hussein, you know. So there are some experiences that have played a role into some of the surreal things that I will probably wind up someday telling my grandchildren about, or not. And in my own writing, because I have a game development company as well that did stuff for modern wargaming, and so we try to integrate some of the weirdness of that and stuff like that. So there's a fair amount of discussions on what is too far and what is not enough. And that's also why, you know, there's a big disconnect, I think, between veterans and veteran humor and mainstream civilians. Is the things that we think are funny, some other people just don't get it, and that's because they haven't seen what we've seen in many cases too, or they haven't spent 3 days getting rained on solid out in a cold, wet mud hole because field training is where it's at, you know, and stuff like that too, you know, because if it ain't raining, you ain't training is the statement that we often make, you know. But anyway, moving back to you, because you're the
I actually think that's really important though, and really valid, because you're talking about like shared trauma experiences and how that kind of creates, like, I guess, the brotherhood that you know, you went through. And I feel like people have those kinds of networks for all kinds of shared trauma experiences. And those are really important, and those are things that everybody, readers and creators, have to contend with when they pick up your product. So I think it's really important. I thank you for sharing that. That was really great.
Well, it's made some of the rules of what we have as on stream versus what we don't have on stream for our live play shows. For example, you know, I mean, in an adult type story where someone knows what they're getting, you know, endangering children may be part of that. We just don't have anything that harms a child on our show ever.
Yeah.
We can have things in the past that people can discuss, but we're not going to graphically discuss it. Or, you know, like a kid that's a ghost, for example, may be there, but you're not going to have a kid who's actually going to, you know, die. Stuff like that, you know. So it'll be pretty easy for the heroes to either save the kids or there won't be any kids involved in that. It's just that simple for us, you know. And that's because we've seen a lot of things happen to kids, and I just don't want to deal with that anymore.
To be fair, and to kind of piggyback on that, I have 2 children, and after my son was about a year old when The Haunting on Hill House came out on Netflix, like that new show that everybody watched and everybody was super into it. I had we watched everything up until like the last episode. I don't think I actually finished it, but we had to go weeks between episodes because, you know, Corey was watching it with me, and I was the one that was so excited about it. And I had like a panic attack in the first episode because things are happening to these children, and I had a newborn, and I had no idea what that was, because I could watch any kind of horror. I could watch gore horror. I could read gore horror and splatter porn. And like, I can do that. That's fine. And then all of a sudden this kid's like crying, and I'm having serious emotions about it. And I had no idea how to deal with that for a while. And I tried watching it again recently just because I was like, I should, you know, power through this. It'll be fine. And I'm not in that place anymore. It's fine. I've had another kid since then, and I couldn't do it. I made it to like the 4th episode, and I'm like, nope, I cannot engage with this in this way.
Yeah, it's one of those very, very interesting changes that occurs once you have a child of your own. And you can explain this to people, and there's only a few people that get it. Those people who get it have very big hearts. But outside of that, until you've had your own, like there was a joke that used to get told that was very funny. What's the difference between bowling balls and babies?
I don't know.
You can't use a truck full of bowling balls and a truck full of babies. And the joke is you can't use a pitchfork to unload a truck full of bowling balls. And it's one of those jokes that was no longer funny to me when it got told. I said it was the worst joke in the world. Please don't ever say that joke again. So
oh my God,
Yeah,
that's
so
awful.
we just got raided by big bearded nerd and Dwight and his group, and so just to bring the depression back a little bit, and the trauma, we're interviewing Hannah Carlan. Hannah Carlan is one of the co-authors of Rime of the Frost Maiden, and she's a great fiction writer as well. We were talking about some of the things that we were discussing, specifically how to write and evoke suffering, and we were talking about some of the things that help bring that to us as we're developing our stories. To change the subject just a little bit, as a writer, no worries, no worries.
I feel so bad that I asked you that question now.
No. Ask all the questions you like. It's okay. And I have 5 kids of my own, so I get it. And I'm proud of every one of those kids. They're fantastic. Thankfully, they're not completely risk takers like their father is.
Yet.
Well, actually, I won't say that's not true. They are definitely my children. Were there any early mistakes you learned from as a writer that you'd impart to others, perhaps, or that you wish you had learned sooner? Like, were there any aha moments for you?
The value of a good outline.
Really?
The value of knowing, like, I feel like there's this, and I mean, I do it too. So like, please don't think that I'm like amazing at this. I love to sit down and say, I want to see where this goes. Mm-hmm. Let me just sit here and write this and see kind of what happens. And it was this badge of honor that I could just sit here and I could churn out 4,000 words in an afternoon and it was going to be great. And that was not true. And so figuring out that wasn't great and that outlines would help me and that I was wrong really helped me start to make better content faster, because I wasn't sitting here going, well, crap, now I'm 5,000 words into this thing and I don't know what to do. Because like I thought I was going to be like 8,000 words and I'm short, and now I'm kind of committed. I kind of feel like I don't know what to do. Good outlines.
When you write as a dungeon master, for example, kind of a different story there, right?
No, same story.
Well,
got to outline.
It is for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you ever have those moments where you're like, man, this would be a great plugin encounter. I should just write this one. And then you write that, and then you get another plugin encounter, and then eventually you have enough of them and you put them together as a cohesive story?
So, yes. Mm-hmm. I get asked to write a lot of like campaign seeds or like kind of one-off encounters or drop-in encounters. And they're great, but when you're thinking about like, okay, this one encounter that I have to do, right? And it's got to be 2,000 words. Okay. Well, I'm thinking about it. And in my process, I don't imagine that the characters just poof into existence in this tavern. Like they have to have had experiences up until then, and they exist as people. And so I'm kind of building on these ideas that I've built for these non-existent characters before and after. Like, how does this encounter help them for the next level that they're going to go to? Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. how are they benefited from having done this? Is it just that they killed the whatever? Or is mm-hmm. it that they killed the whatever that did something, that released something or helped or did, like, and now they've got an entire people that think that they're amazing. How does that benefit them as a group? And I tend to sketch those things out, and then I'm left with other encounters that could exist. And I tend to just put those in a file on my computer and never look at them again.
Oh, really?
Because I just don't have time to.
I need to borrow that file, that set of files. We'll talk later.
We can chat.
Yeah, I've got a project for us both then. I work a little differently. So I do build outlines. I mean, outlines were a big part of, me being published as well, and in some other completely different parts of my life. But in the TTRPG space, I do outlines. I do those. But there are times when I see this scene and I'm like, man, that would be a great scene. And I just build that mm-hmm. encounter, right? I was like, have that as a plugin. So if there's a part where it fits and it works with the story, I'll do it. If it doesn't, it doesn't, you know, and I keep it in my DM toolbox, you know. And that's happened a few times. And lately I've been putting them together and starting to, you know, release them to the wild after I've play tested them a few times. And I'm putting one together right now involving well, I won't say too much about it, but it involves a scarecrow in a cornfield, and it's very scary.
Nice.
Yeah. And there's a little mini story built into it that the players can kind of figure out as the way they go through, but it's not big enough to matter. Like, it would be something you could do over 1 or 2 sessions, but there's a story there that is going to make players think like, oh, what happened here, as they find different things and figure stuff out, and then stuff starts happening. Right.
Yeah.
But it's obviously not something I would run an entire campaign on. I mean, do you do entire campaigns as an outline, or do you do, like, say, arcs?
Depends.
Yeah.
On what I'm trying to accomplish. The very few times that I've tried to run campaigns as the DM, you know, you get like half a dozen sessions in, and then their hours changed, or somebody's kid picked up a new sport, and then they kind of fall off. So I've never run anything substantial that far out. So I don't plan that far out. But what's funny though is that you're talking about that and getting these like nuggets, and this like nugget becomes like a little bit of a seed that turns into this encounter. And I wrote, Corey and I both did. I mean, I don't want to say like I wrote it and he didn't do anything, because he did, absolutely.
Yeah.
But Corey and I did this.
Full disclosure, for everybody who just joined us, Corey is her husband.
Yes.
And everyone wants to get to know Hannah so they can meet her husband. Yeah. Just so everybody knows.
People don't care about Corey's the charismatic one. Corey's the one that's like knows who everybody is and like talks to people and is like super awesome socially. I am a potato. But we were trying to do games. This is like back in like 2017. We were trying to figure out how to write modules, because that's what we wanted to do. And I thought that a lot of them sucked. And so I was like, why can't I just, like a lot of modules suck. And I'm like, why am I paying for this on the GM's Guild when it sucks? So I was like, why don't I just do a masquerade ball? And he was like, well, why do you want to do a masquerade ball? And I was like, because it's fucking cool. So that became Masquerade Duluth, which is like one of our best-selling like modules on DM's Guild. And then we were stuck at a light one day in Seattle, and there was this sign about like fish in the creek that was below us. And I was like, why would you have to defend a fish? And he's like, what? And I'm like, why would you have to defend a fish? Like Silgar, like, what if Xanathar didn't know that his minions were worried about him, and so they replicated Silgar, and they had this whole pond of Silgars, and they had people guarding them, and then one day they hired your party to come guard them, and he's like, you're crazy. But that became our Xanathar Guild missions that accompanied the Waterdeep campaign. That was part of it. And so like these like nuggets turn into things. And never disregard a nugget. Like that's the meat of it.
That's what gets it started. That's what kicks the story over. Right, yes. Right. What would you say is your past project that is your most successful or popular based on these nuggets?
Rime of the Frost Maiden is probably going to have to top that list.
Oh, really?
Merely because when I sat down with Chris Perkins and Bill Benham and to talk about this project and like what I was doing, I was like, for my chapter, can I just build like an entire TPK section? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, that's right. That's it. That's awesome. And so I did. And then they were really happy with what I did, and it worked out. But that was a really great experience in that regard. I had, so when like you get, when you are given information to write things for game companies of large sizes, sometimes they have really robust outlines for you to follow. And sometimes they have 57 words. So wow. I wrote about 22,000 words off of a 57 word prompt. and then there was like a map. So that's all I had. And it was fine. And I totally did it. And nobody wanted to do that, which is how I got stuck with it. But then I looked at it and I was like, this is fine. I'm just going to do this whole section over here. You can die. It's easy. And that's what happened. And they loved it. So it worked out really well for me. But yeah, Rime the Frost Maiden was probably the best or the most successful.
So far.
Thus far.
Yeah. You have plenty of future ahead of you.
I have a long night ahead of me. I have a lot to do. It happens.
Well, I definitely understand that. Is there a game that was made, or a game or a module that was made by someone else that you would absolutely recommend above all others?
A game or a module, like not just like a 5e dependent?
No, any game you like. I mean, like you can make, if you want to call it an adventure module, great. Or you could just say any game in a tabletop space.
So anything
board games, card games, tabletop RPGs.
Anything tabletop is going to be Blades in the Dark if you've never played it, because it's bomb.
Oh, I've played it. We have a copy of it over there. We're actually working on doing a Blades in the Dark stream.
Oh, really? How's it going? How's your night?
One in? We'll talk later.
We might chat. As far as 5e, I don't want to give you the wrong name, so I have to go check my downloads real fast to make sure that I don't miss.
No problem.
Because I hate misspeaking. My purchases.
She's going to be very careful not to share her screen right now.
Very careful not to share my screen. That's accurate. My library, that's where it goes. I don't get on DM's Guild enough. This is the problem. Dino World by Celeste Conowitch, available on the DM's Guild, is phenomenal. If you want Jurassic Park as a 5e module, you got it with Dino World.
Okay.
And like, that sounds strange. I know that does. You're going to be surprised because it's great.
I think I'm going to check out Dino World, if for no other reason. I know a particular player that would absolutely adore that one. And I would run it just for her. So, because she would make it so much fun to do that. So, let's kind of make this a little more fun for a moment. So let's do.
Has it been fun for you so far?
It's been no. Excuse me. A little less serious. Let's bring the seriousness off a bit. Make this a little more more.
We'll dial it back.
Yeah, I think what's the word I'm looking for? A little more not lackadaisical, upbeat. So we're gonna do you know that you remember the old ASL trope from online discussions? We're gonna do a little thing.
Location?
Yeah. But we're gonna do this. ABC, alignment, background, and class. What would your real life alignment, background, and class be?
Probably true chaotic. Maybe chaotic neutral.
So you're a sociopath? Okay.
Maybe a chaotic good.
Probably.
It depends on if my children are present. Definitely way better of a person when they're around.
Yeah.
Background. Ooh, background. Probably like a scholar background.
Cloistered scholar? Sage?
Sage, probably.
Okay.
If I had to pick. And then class. Probably a failed fighter. Like a fighter where like strength is really, or dex is their dump stat. Like not a good fighter. Like I'd love to be a good fighter, but I'm not a good fighter. Okay. I'm an intellectually a great fighter, but that's not how fighters fight. And I'm not cool enough to be a bard. So if I would be a failed bard too. I would be really bad.
Are you sure you wouldn't be a wizard?
Would I be a wizard?
Yeah.
Probably not. I'd probably forget too many things. I have a really bad memory. I have a photographic memory, which is really helpful.
Sometimes
right?
You don't have film.
But sometimes it's like there are just these whole gaps, but yet I know exactly what like textbook pages look like when I was in like 5th grade. Mm-hmm. But there are these strange gaps, and especially after I had kids, like that just totally crapped on everything. But
we used to call that the baby was borrowing the brain.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
You get it.
I do. If you walked in and you were a character and you walked into a curio shop, what trinket would you find?
I would be a sucker for any kind of writing utensil.
So a quill and ink.
Mm-hmm. Anything, especially if it looked like it was probably cursed, I would like happily and without any kind of investigation check pick that baby up and start going.
Okay, so if the ink had like a skull and crossbones on it, perhaps
if it literally
has a
said
slightly
"Don't
reddish,
touch me,"
a slightly reddish tinge, and it required a few drops of your blood with every writing, but the writing would flow and the ink would be so beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wouldn't question at all whether or not the ink was really my own blood. Never question it.
Never.
No.
As a DM, what would the tavern name be? The players would all meet in
the Bent Elbow.
The Bent Elbow. I love that. Bent Elbow. Okay, we're actually creating a list now. We're going to be starting to ask people stuff like this on every show, and we're creating a list of names. Yeah,
that's great.
If you didn't have your characters start in a tavern for the start of the campaign, how would you want them to start?
At a prayer circle or some kind of like religious experience where they were all like summoned to be part of, and then their contact NPC is the person who is either leading the prayer circle or imprisoned at the prayer circle.
Imprisoned in the player circle. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I totally dig that.
Gotta have options.
I think that's a completely genius idea, and I won't steal that from you publicly.
That's fine. I totally just made it up, so you're free to.
No. I love it. I think you should integrate that into something. We should talk. Okay. I think there's something there. So you're going to be doing stuff at Cyclops Con for Baldwin Games, and you're excited about that. What are the dates for that?
Like February 26th through 28th, I believe. But I'm going to look at my calendar. Yeah, 26th through 28th. I was right.
26th through 28th of February?
Yes, of February. Spawn of Cyclops Con.
Okay, Spawn of Cyclops Con, 26th through 28th February. You can potentially get in on a game with Hannah Carlan.
Yeah. I'm running a game at noon. I think it's called Pit of Annihilation. And then I'm running a game that night. I think it's at 10 o'clock Eastern. Both of these are in Eastern. Forgot what that one's called, but it's also of Annihilation. So if you look for my name or look for Annihilation, I'll pop up.
Okay. And where can people find you on social media, Hannah?
On Twitter, you can find me at Stop That Old Woman. The A is missing in that, but otherwise, it's pretty much where I live.
Okay.
I do the Blades in the Dark. I'm in a group. We just started our second season on Wednesday nights on twitch.tv/Saverick, SAVERICK. And then on Saturday nights,
I saw him in chat too, by the way.
Yeah, he was hanging around, being a weirdo. And then we do a Star Wars campaign on Saturday nights. So I've never played Star Wars. I know nothing about the extended
Star Wars Edge of the Empire from Fantasy Flight?
No, KOTOR.
Oh, really? Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah, I think that's the right one.
Okay.
Saga Edition. No, he's right there. He said Saga
D20
Edition.
Saga Edition. Okay.
I don't know anything about anything.
So the D20 game system. Okay.
Everybody gasps a lot, and I'm just kind of like, are we going to die? I don't know. Because I don't know who these people are.
We do a little bit of Edge of the Empire on our side of this. So it's always good to see another Star Wars person around. And we could talk about that more some other time. But well, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
From there, guys, I think that's it for the night. Thank you so much for watching our interview with Hannah Carlan. If you get a chance, please tune in next week where we'll have more fun and hijinks on the Games Tavern Happy Hour, where we have the news, reviews, and interviews. And we'll see you guys next week. at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday on the Games Tavern Happy Hour.